This is the Final Word Cricket Podcast, just the one, just the regular one, just the weekly one. Jeff Lemon, Adam Collins, sitting at the kitchen table in London, as is our habit at the moment. I don't know why I just knocked on the table. The table can't let me in. It's not how tables work.
No.
But look, here we are. We had just had a brief delay to start recording the show because we had to get the laundry off the line because it started to rain.
Very domesticated.
We're at the innings break of the second Women's Ashes ODI, which means I've just written a piece, finished the OBO, you've done whatever you were doing. Now we're waiting for the second innings to start. We've got to record the weekly podcast, after which we'll record the daily podcast when this match finishes. The daily podcast will go out before the weekly podcast. So this one that we're recording first, we don't know what's going to happen yet in this match. But in the one we'll record later, we will know, and it will go out before this one goes out.
That's it. We've always liked messing with the space-time continuum on the final word. Our interest in sliders, our interest in quantum leap, our interest in Back to the Future, all do stuff like that, and so do we. So we know what England have been set for victory. We know what Georgia Wareham did in the final over. We know about the rhythms of that innings, and we know that it might rain in Taunton on Tuesday, which means that this game might be what it all rides on.
It might be the decider. Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah. And you won't know that until a future point in time as well. So that's also space-time continuum stuff.
Absolutely.
Do you go all out to try to win this game? Well, I suppose you have to, because either team has to win both of them in order to actually win the series.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it sort of is in keeping with our can't stop, won't stop theme of the show. We've always had that mantra, but at the moment we're like, right, how do we find time to do the weekly show adequately? Well, we'll use the innings break to at least start it and see where we go.
Yes, and another thing we'd like to talk about on this show is the hit 90s sitcom The Nanny, starring Fran Drescher, who has had an amazing week, it must be said, as the president of the Screen Actors Guild Union, coming to the point of calling strike action against the big guys in Hollywood. The
Mr.
speech,
Sheffield and Co.
Mr. Sheffield and Co. Yeah, probably. Broadway producer, so I'm sure he was involved in ripping off actors all along the line as well. The speech that some of our listeners found and posted up on our chat channels and so on that Fran Drescher gives is an extraordinary, stirring piece of public oratory in a way that you maybe didn't expect if you didn't know the very pro-union stance of the star of The Nanny.
She should be running for public office. I reckon this might be the sort of thing that catapults her into the Congress or something like that, or the State House possibly. Either way, I only caught a couple of clips of it. I haven't read it in full, but yeah, I saw on Discord there was some activity around this, and what a woman. I'm glad we've backed in the work of Fran Drescher and Fran Fine more broadly.
Well, and
across the years on this show.
Other people coming back to, there's an episode of The Nanny in which Fran Fine refuses to cross a picket line to go into a fancy restaurant.
Yeah.
So, obviously the policies were there, and she stood by her politics throughout. So, solidarity, comrade, and go and try to take some money off those. I'm going to watch my language early in the show.
Yeah, you should do.
Right. What do we need to talk about our live show?
We do.
Well.
We've got quite a bit to get through before
it's just us, so we're not going to be ripping off ourselves.
No, nor will we be ripping off Stephen Finn, who was our guest for the night. He was our guest in Adelaide a couple of years ago, and a great one at that. So we've got the half-price tickets going for our lovely patrons, who we were discussing before on the Discord page, 15 quid for them. And speaking of, Jeff, we were, after the Enid Bakewell interview that went out on the weekend, which I was just chuffed with listening back. She was everything you could possibly want in a guest. I'm thrilled that you were able to spend some time with her at Trent Bridge the other week. But we put the call out there, become our 700th patron, and that's happened.
It has happened. It is Peter Lenigan, or Lenahan, forgive me, don't know which way your pronunciation goes at this point, who has come through as patron number 700. So solidarity with you as well, Peter. Hope you're not an anti-union boss. Otherwise, you'll probably be unsubscribing pretty quickly.
I doubt there are many people who are amongst our 700 patrons who have an automatic distaste for trade unions.
Probably.
That's my sense.
Probably unlikely.
It's a bit self-selecting, the people we have with us.
But we have got to 700, which means we're well past Jimmy, because he's still languishing on 685, James Anderson, in terms of career wickets.
Might be 687, I reckon, but still, we've got him covered.
Okay, well, whatever it is, unless he takes another 15 or so at Old Trafford, which you can't rule out. We're not in the business of ruling things out.
Of course not.
On this particular show. But we're trending towards Shane Warne areas. And that would be a remarkable next tally to get.
Yep.
James Anderson might be trending towards Shane Warne areas as well.
More to do, but heading in the right direction. I think that was the Morris Yema campaign slogan many years ago, just to keep with the political theme at the start of our program today. Yeah, so 15 quid for patrons, 30 quid full freight, but it's a great venue. I went there. I promised I would go there on Friday night. I did go there for about an hour and a half to the How Does It Feel to Be Loved indie disco. I ended up advancing onto White Heat at the Lexington after that till very late.
Wow.
I needed it. I needed a blowout. We've been working so bloody hard. I needed a night on the tiles, and I had a night on the tiles. But I did scope out the venue, and I was reminded that it'll be a brilliant place to watch because there's the booths up the back with the sort of nice soft furnishings. There'll be plenty of room for
the Lawrences, as we like to call them, the Lawrence booths.
There'll be it's a nice intimate sort of feel in there. It's a nice big great bar, and there's great food and so on. So there's no reason you can't get in there early and have a bite to eat and settle in for an evening with Finney. And those spaces are somewhat limited. So get in now. Don't leave it late. Tell your cricketing mates that there's a thing going on the night before the Oval Test match, and that, who knows, it might be a test for the ages. So what better way to warm up for that than watch Jeff and I put on our one and only live show of this particular tour?
Yeah, it's boutique. It's like when Prince played at Bennett's Lane in Melbourne, the little jazz club. It's maybe 150 seater, I reckon. This room downstairs.
Yeah.
So. Maybe it's excessive to compare us to Prince. I'm not sure if I've thought that through.
Or maybe Prince playing at the boutique nightclub.
Yeah.
That was unlikely to happen as well. One more thing, by the way, which I found out recently, which I was quite chuffed with. Well, no, I wasn't really, because I know the charts don't mean anything. But for the first time in a while, we went to number 1 on the iTunes charts for cricket podcasts and so on, which... we've done
so inexplicable.
That is something we have done before. That's not a new thing. We have been fortunate to have been supported by the iTunes algorithm in years gone by, but it reflects, I guess, the fact that we've had a pretty big couple of months. So thank you everybody for listening, and those who've moved on to Patreon. There's been a lot of them recently. We love you dearly.
If you've been watching the videos as well, you notice my hair's growing back, so that's another bit of development.
And the last thing I want to say about the live show, Jeff, sorry, just quickly, is that it's in conjunction with the Lord's Taverners, so we're really grateful for their support. They've been with us for years now. They create a range of opportunities for young disabled people and those from deprived areas to engage with sport and recreational activities for their local communities. The program supports some of the most marginalised and at-risk young people in the UK. And all we're really asking out of that is to sign up to their mailing list. If not for the mailing list, we wouldn't have learnt about the Edinburgh Half Marathon. We wouldn't have been able to raise 6,200 quid for them there. We're going to do more of that through the year. So it's all in the notes, but bit.ly/TAVS sign up. And the TAVS are going to be well represented at the live show with Finney, who's an ambassador for them. And if you want to come to Edinburgh and play a cricket game against the TAVS, please tell me very soon. With the TAVS.
Against us.
We're going to play with the TAVS on the Tuesday.
Okay.
And the final word 11 is playing on the Wednesday. That's Tuesday, the 22nd of August. And Wednesday, the 23rd of August. A lot of us are going up on the 21st, the Monday. We'll be watching fringe shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night, and going home on August the 24th. It's all in train, but we're still a few short. So sing out soon, because there'll be WhatsApp groups starting this week.
Just before we get to a bit of Ashes chat, Major League Cricket got underway as well. There's been a bit of fun stuff from there. Nothing better than Adam Zampa bowling with the number 420 on the back of his shirt.
With the speed dealer sunglasses as well.
The transparent ones. The non-tinted, single.
So serving no practical use.
But I've never known what the clear glasses are for. I suppose they keep wind out of your eyes. Don't cyclists wear them?
I think it's to do with glare. But anyway, him wearing those, that particular design, and I wonder how long he'll be allowed to wear. It's a bit like when Lockie Ferguson had 69 on his shirt for about 3 months, and then I guess the ICC. Lance Klusener was a 69 as well, wasn't he? Yeah, okay. I think so.
Top and tail.
But yeah,
working at both ends of the order.
True enough, with Lance from time to time. But yeah, so 420 for Zamps, always keeping it real, always keeping us on our toes. Coming to a Mad Cat dismissal near you soon as well, I hope as well.
Respect to a real one in Adam Zampa, who's not here in England, who's not in the Ashes squad. Neither is Glenn Maxwell. He's gone home. That's a little sad. We were. Yeah. I mean, if people watched the show last week, I don't think we were serious in thinking that it would happen, but it was a nice idea.
Okay, so I want to explain this. So first of all, I think it was well and truly worthy of consideration, and I don't think there was much of a conversation around that number 8 spot when we were gibbering on a week ago or 6 days ago. Remember, it was Maxwell playing at Warwickshire, which made us all think, well, hang on, is there a more efficient way to use that resource, that luxury item, considering they've already got 4 quicks, depending on which way they go with Green or Marsh. Well, Green would be a quick and Marsh would be a more batting all-rounder, but still 4 seamers.
Can still swing it.
Can still swing it, absolutely. But Green is probably seen as more of a frontline seamer if required. Now, with all of that, they might have just stumbled on the formula they will use for Manchester getting both Green and Marsh into the team. So, yeah, I thought Maxwell, spin option, big ground at Old Trafford. Who would England least want to play against? He made 81 from 67 for Warwickshire against Kent. To, I guess, remind us of this point, he makes unusual runs. It's always been part of the Maxwell story. But in going through that train of thought, I wonder whether this might actually be where we get to for Old Trafford in terms of overlooking Murphy, have head bowl the spin overs they need as and when, and that's how they absorb both Green and Marsh. I wonder.
Because I suppose if you've got Travis Head, you've got Steve Smith, you've got Marnus Labuschagne, and between the 3 of them, they could bowl a bit. In terms of slower stuff.
Yeah, and look, having 2 or 3 part-timers does not make us a full spinner.
No.
I don't want to pretend that. But
and the number of times we've seen England suffer from picking all quicks and not having a proper spinner.
Yeah, 2 part-timers doesn't make a full-timer. However, if they don't anticipate using Murphy in that way, and look, Old Trafford could be anything. We don't know yet. We haven't gone up there yet. It's a TBC on the surface. But last year, South Africa fell into the trap of playing 2 spinners, and it backfired. England were able to mostly get the job done with seam. If it's a pitch that feels like it's going to be of that variety again, if they think they might need their short pitch attack, which needs 4 seamers, maybe even 5, that might even trend them yet further in the direction of having all of them in the side and lengthening their batting lineup. And that would probably see Alex Carey walking out at number 8. I mean, that in the same way that would have made Australia very deep with Maxwell batting 8, so it would be with Carey.
But so effectively, if Green's playing for Murphy, then that obviates the need to drop Warner at the top, right? Because the other way that people were trying to piece this together was if Green and Marsh play, then it has to be everybody shuffle up, Labuschagne open, Smith 3 kind of situation.
That's the other way of doing it.
So the other way of doing it is your spinner is now Cameron Green.
Well, your other way of doing it is you have, like you say, Marnus Labuschagne opens. And given he's a pretty resourceful dude, I wouldn't say that's by extension automatically a bad idea. He's a right-hander.
Well, I suppose
you're getting another left-hander out the way of Stuart Broad early on round the wicket, which is, I guess, a bit of a factor given the way Warner was dismissed both times at Leeds. I should say, for the record, I don't think they'll do that with Warner. No. It would be such a big story. It would change the whole energy around the Aussie team, getting rid of a veteran like that at this particular point. Having been 2-0 up and not far away from winning in straight sets, dumping Warner would be massive. But if they desperately want to get Green and Marsh in, and they're willing
have a spinner
and not willing to part with Murphy, then that would probably be the only way, because none of the other members of the top 6 are being dispensed with.
There's the old rationale, right, that if you're a first drop, you're effectively an opener anyway, because you can be walking out second ball of the innings.
Absolutely.
So you have to be able to open, and obviously Labuschagne's come in at 1 down for a bunch of times in his career. Also, he's not going so well anyway, so in a way, to me that would make it more likely, because it's not, say, a Travis Head situation where he's going so well at 5, you're like, well, just don't mess with him.
Don't mess with it. Yeah.
Let him stay there. If Labuschagne hasn't been dominating, then maybe something like that can work. We've seen the changeover between first drop and opening plenty of times. I mean, Khawaja's an obvious case in point. Played at first drop for Australia for years and years, and now he's the supreme opener. Justin Langer, example, plenty of others as well of players interchanging between those spots. So they could do it. And this isn't going on any intel at the moment. This is really just gut feel on reading the conversations, the tones of voice, the way that the selectors have talked about things, little oblique things. I've thought, I think they're thinking about it quite seriously, but I don't think they're going to do it in terms of leaving out Warner. That's my instinct.
Me too.
Based on nothing.
Vibes. I think that it's more of a... Look, the fact that he missed out twice in the same test abroad...
In the same
had
way.
He been out to... I don't know.
Anyone
had he been
else.
out to Ollie Robinson and Mark Wood, we probably aren't having the same chat.
Yeah, it's 2019 flashback stuff.
Yeah, that's right. A bit of winning the previous war sort of thing, maybe possibly from the Australian Generals. But look, I'd be surprised if they go that way. But I also understand and respect that there is a very strong case for playing both Marsh, the inform man, who was so instrumental in Australia getting anywhere near a competitive total in the first innings. You've got to kind of back the go with the hot hand per Khawaja in 2022. The convention would have been, well, Khawaja stepped in, made runs, you now leave him out.
Sure.
But they made a tough call on Harris then that was really harsh given the way Harris had played at Melbourne 2 weeks earlier. If they make the harsh call on Warner, though, the difference is his career's over. And that's a big call to make. Well, at least his test career is over.
Yeah.
So,
and Harris, he's sort of waiting in the wings then to resume earlier than he might have otherwise.
And there's a similarity between the Australian side and the England side in that they don't like sharp changes at the moment.
It can look like the panic,
McCullum,
right?
Yeah, the McCullum philosophy has been keep things as stable as you can in the dressing room. So, the other one that could come from left field is Michael Neser. He made an unbeaten 176 for Glamorgan during the week. Interestingly, took one wicket, only bowled 11 overs out of the 96 Glamorgan sent down. They intentionally have not bowled him into the turf. They've kept him fresh for Australia if to be selected. That can be the only reason, right? Otherwise, why wouldn't he bowled second change?
Why wouldn't they give him the chance to take wickets to press his case?
Oh, I mean, it was a shitty rainy game out of Glamorgan against Leicestershire. There was no chance of a result. They were batting on a road, all those types of things. But having made runs, he bowled 11 overs and nicked off the opener and didn't do an awful lot more than that. But that would be the other, how do you use number 8, acknowledging that I cannot conceive of a scenario where the big three don't play.
Right.
Stark, Cummins, Hazelwood surely play,
yes,
given the break. And this is kind of a break thing, isn't it? We've had a chance to stop and just let it sink in a bit more.
But that's also why the Warner story is so big, because people haven't had much else to think about for 8 days.
The players have been away. England, by contrast, named their squad within a day of the third test ending. They said, here's our 14. We're going with it. We're not considering a change with Folkes and Bairstow or anything else that might have been on the table. Yeah. They've gone that way. Whereas
sort
Australia
of shut down talking about it.
Yeah, whereas Australia have literally left the country, many of them, to have a holiday. They're back in camp, I think, tomorrow. Sorry, right. And they'll start ramping up.
A couple came back 2 days ago. Some came back on the 14th.
Yeah, there was some optional training going on Saturday in Manchester, but generally speaking, the time away, it does occasionally lend itself. It's the beauty of overnight. We were talking about that around the World Test Championship final, that when you have time to stop and pause and think, it can be a good thing. Or sometimes it can be where you overthink too. So that's the challenge for the Aussie selectors.
So and where do England land? Do they bring back Anderson, given he's had the test off, he's had the longer break, playing at his home ground, all the rest of it, all of the symbolism around it? Have they installed a couple of new knees into Ben Stokes to get him back out on the field for test match number 4? And how do they set up that attack? You would assume that Wood has to play because he was the point of difference.
Yeah.
And probably Anderson on home ground basis plays, and probably Broad on a Warner basis plays.
I think so. I think all of that's logical. But if they rock up and they see a pitch that looks like Birmingham, it's not going to be like Birmingham. But if they get to a pitch that looks, ready to play on 2 days out, and it's flat as a tack, and it's going to be invariably about bouncer war stuff, then Josh Tongue might come straight back into the frame at the expense of Anderson, who's, he's just not born for that, right? He's not built for that. He said himself, those pitches are kryptonite to him. I don't see why or how that would happen, but that's one scenario I see where Tongue plays ahead of Anderson. If it looks anything like the pitches that Anderson's played on there for the last 23 years, however, then surely you'd go with a guy who knows that place better than anybody.
Well, and that's the thing we've been talking about all the way through is why, if you were England, would you reduce your comparative advantage in terms of surfaces that are going to aid that sort of swing bowling and seam bowling?
This all assumes, by the way, that Robinson will be dropped. As it happens, we've just priced that in, haven't we? That none of us, he might play at the Oval. It's kind of like the Neser thing, right? Neser might play at the Oval because Hazelwood playing back-to-back Test matches when he's been so injury-prone over the last couple of years. I don't think that's a strong probability of happening. I think it's a great outcome for Australia if Hazelwood can back up twice, but I do think they'll need that depth option ready to roll at the Oval if it doesn't go quite right. And so it might be for Robinson, who feels out of favour right now. But, if it doesn't work out for one of the 3 quicks, or 4 quicks rather, at Old Trafford, he could find himself back for the Oval.
Well, I don't think we actually looked all that much at what happened at Headingley, which is Robinson going off so early in the innings with an injury that can be a kind of conditioning injury sometimes, that can be that your body's not right to get through a game. and there's a randomness to it, to back spasms coming on, and they are disabling. You know, I'm not trying to diminish that it's a serious thing. They completely get in the way of doing just about anything, let alone actually trying to bowl fast.
Yep.
So there's a reason why it completely shuts you down as an athlete. But what's the risk? What's the comparative risk of picking him again and then having that happen? And particularly if it's... So in that case, they had the extra seamer where they had Wokes, and so it didn't actually have that much of an outcome given it was a short match. Really, it was 3 days of playing time or less than.
Yeah.
And so they got through it okay. But if they have a 5-day grind and they lose Robinson again, then can they afford to take that risk?
Yeah, they kind of got lucky. Well, Australia did too, right? Australia lost line in the one test match. It would have been bloody helpful at Lords, but it degenerated into that bouncer war, which Robinson was quite effective at as well, I should say, on the way through. But yeah, the way things transpired, Australia not batting for an incredibly long time in the second innings, and Wokes being so effective as the lower order all-rounder, again, that number 8 spot we've been going back and forth around. I reckon that England were fortunate that Australia weren't able to go deep second time, in the same way that Australia were lucky that England have never really shown a willingness to bat for bulk overs in the series when they lost line at Lords.
So 2-1, is it? I don't know. What's your vibe? Do you think we're going to the 5th test?
I think so. Yeah, I think most likely scenario is that England win here, just because it's been that kind of series, right? I just feel it's just the energy of it. Although I probably would have said the same thing 4 years ago after England won at Leeds. I think we were probably, both of us then at Old Trafford, hoping England would win last time, because it would have would have made a brilliant finale. I mean,
yeah, that finale was a bit flat in the end, wasn't it?
It was, and people, I think, when talking about 19, reflect too much on the stuff up at the Oval and bowling first and not going quite right. Like, that was a pretty bloody good series until then. In fact, it was talking to you last week on the pod that made me remember that. I've been too quick to write that off as just another, there was quite a bit there across the first 3 or 4 weeks of it. But my hope is that we go in 2-2. That's always the hope, right, for an Ashes series. It rarely happens, but if we do go in with all to play for at the Oval, it'll be massive. All
right, that's kind of where we're at. That's where we've been. That's where we're going. Before we reach the end of the segment, shall we play a little bit of Nerd Pledge? Nerd Pledge. It's the game that we play with the nice people on the internet. This is how it works. It's a reverse quiz. People fund this program by sending in contributions that are not normal denominations of currency. They're very specific ones. They relate to cricket in some way. We try to work out what they mean. Sometimes we have a guess and we're wrong, and then we come back and we revisit them. So I'm going to look at a revisit today, because this is a number we didn't get right from Toby Wilson. It was $4.65.
And he's left a clue for you. I was excited and slightly embarrassed to hear my $4.65 come up this week. I mentioned that I dismissed other numbers because I had heard you guys cover them, and I got to within a fortnight of you reaching my number before the match in question was covered in depth. I also misled you with my reference to my hometown. He puts that in parentheses. Now residing in Sydney, not rural or regional. Jeff was correct. Think domestic cricket, an innings-related number, but not runs. So quite a lot in that from Toby for you to decode.
So I was looking at, I think when I initially got it, I was looking at smaller like country towns or something like that, where something cricket-related might have happened. But a place that is not strictly a town, but might be called a town in Australia that maybe has a little bit of a regional flavour to it, might be Adelaide.
I see.
That might be.
Which is why he was reluctant to lean too heavily on town, I see. Because Adelaide's not, a town, is it?
No. I mean, I think if you're from Adelaide and someone who's not from Adelaide calls it a town, you'd get mad. But if you are from Adelaide and you want to call it a town, that's okay.
Sure.
I think it's a piss out of the tent, don't piss in kind of situation.
Yeah, that works.
With Adelaide and towns. But this has happened a few times on Nerd Pledge, where somebody has a number that they wait for a long time for it to come up, and then the answer comes up before their version of the number comes up. So a game involving Adelaide that we talked about shortly before this came in was the Sheffield Shield final of 1996. We've talked about it a couple of times because it is a mad, ridiculous game. South Australia are on top of the table, therefore they only need to draw the game. For Western Australia, Adam Gilchrist makes 189 from 187 balls, batting at number 7. And South Australia, nearly 200 behind on the first innings. They get set 343. They lose some wickets. they try to bat it out for a draw. And we talked about all of the efforts in that draw batting version of things that Ben Stokes would despise, but that has its own sort of allure. Greg Blewett, 72 from 275 balls. Jamie Siddons, 4 from 134 balls. He was injured as well, I think, and couldn't run. Tim May, 0 from 52 balls. And at 9 wickets down, Peter McIntyre, 6 from 45 balls.
And Shane George,
1 from 30 balls. So we talked in that answer about South Australia facing 129 overs. What I didn't mention was the fact that it took them 465 minutes. That's how long they batted, 7 hours and 35 minutes, and that will be the 465 for Toby Wilson.
Fantastic. Thank you, Toby, for clarifying that. So we've done a revisit there because we weren't able to do any on the Storytime ep we recorded last week. Bear with us.
We could sneak in one more.
You think?
I think so.
Okay, let's do it. Our second revisit. Who is I got it in front of me. Shannon Blackmore and Jeff, the notes for you here. While it sounded perfect, my 743, this was an AUD, was not the story about Ray Lindwall. Oh, I think that was me. I can't believe that's not right.
No, it was my answer, but it's a Queensland related clue.
Yeah, and didn't we lean pretty heavily into the fact that, anyway, it doesn't matter.
Lindy took 7 for 43 in India, I believe.
Yeah, it was a career best, and it seemed an obvious connection now you think of it. You were right to keep your focus in the vicinity of Wollongabba, but shift formats and look much more recently.
Shift formats, look more recently. Let's look at somebody who we were watching play just about an hour ago today. Beth Mooney, one of the early Final Word faves. Remember interviewing her and Grace Harris at the Governor General's 11?
I do, at Drummoyne.
Was it 2015?
15. It was the first iteration. It was like October 2015. It was before the big Bash
before the inaugural Big Bash, maybe.
I reckon before the inaugural Big Bash, or maybe it had just.
Maybe it was just after.
Might have been just after. No, you know what? It must have been just after because
February 2016.
We were already well and truly into the Beth Mooney story.
Yeah.
And we spoke to her for the first time. In that same summer was when we
were pumping her up to get a gig for the T20 World Cup that was coming up in March 2016.
That's it.
We were determined. She was maybe the original has to go to India player.
Well, there were two of them, weren't there? There were her and Amanda Jade Wellington, who we were all over for. They need to be fast-tracked. They need to play in the Aussie team as soon as possible. And I had Amanda Jade Wellington as a guest of mine at Lord's a few weeks ago up in the commentary box and put her on for 20 minutes, and her personality, shone through very quickly when, I can't remember who it was, but Australia took a wicket and Wello was giving it huge in the commentary box, and she remains one of my favourite people in cricket. But yeah, I think of Beth Mooney and I think of Amanda Jade Wellington as those original Final Word faves when the podcast was brand new and fresh and all that.
And the way that Mooney has become, I reckon, the most important player in the Australian women's team.
Yeah.
Now, it all starts with that 2015-16 WBBL season. She made 400 runs even that year.
Yep.
She's never dipped below 400 runs in a Big Bash season since. She's made 482, 465, 486, 551, 547. Last season made 434. And her biggest season in 2019-20, just before COVID, she made 743 runs in the season. Made a lot of those at Allan Border Field, playing for the Brisbane Heat. So it's near the Wollongabba.
Yes.
We've switched formats. 743, Shannon Blackmore could be that. In that season, didn't make 100. 9 half centuries in 16 matches in the WBBL that season, including one in the final. Took Brisbane all the way for the second time running. I'm trying to remember if that was the season where she almost had heat stroke and she was wearing the ice collar while she was batting.
That was the year before, but you're right.
Yep.
Both times that she made runs in the final, it was after having kept for 20 overs with a lid on, and the first of those two was when it was 40 degrees and she was really sick. So
she was throwing up at square leg.
And she told me, I interviewed her in 2020 for something or another, maybe The Guardian, and the conversation went to her fitness levels. And earlier in her career, I mean, it had been put onto her fairly and squarely, unless you get much fitter, you'll be limited as a cricketer. And she took it upon herself to go to the next level, and it showed on days like that when she was able to perform under some duress.
So that's the 743. That's my bid for you, Shannon Blackmore. If you want to play this game and test us out, you go to patreon.com/thefinalword. You join up with our community. You can hang out with the nice people online in the chat room. You can get half-price tickets to our show.
Do it. Come to our show.
You can help us keep making this show, and you can play the ridiculous, beautiful game of Nerd Pledge.
8 days a week. Right, we should take a break.
Yep.
When we return from that, initially at least, we'll be talking about India's test match in Dominica against the West Indies.